Hello everybody and welcome back to Planet Coaster 2. Welcome back to Le Jardin Magique. We are back again in the park today with a little update on the area that we started in the last episode. Now in the last episode I did kind of say that I would be back with multiple stations and things finished. I have not done as much as I was sort of thinking that I might. Part of the reason for that is that I did get COVID, so I've been kind of out of it in the last week or so. Before I went down with COVID, I did complete this teacups here, and as you can see, this is kind of quite an interesting structure, so that's going to be the main kind of focus of interest today. And then I'll show you a couple of other little bits around this area that I've done, but we'll save going too much into the rapids and stuff over on the right there until that's looking a little bit more complete. But yeah, as I say, the teacups are going to be the main focus today. It's going to be a kind of pseudo update style video because I basically saved, as I was building this structure, I made lots of different save files, mainly just because I wasn't exactly sure what I was doing and how I wanted to do it, and so it's just useful to be constantly saving so that at any point I could just revert back to how it looked at a different point in time. But it turns out, in hindsight, it's actually really useful for me to be able to go back and show you a kind of step-by-step of how I put together a structure like this. So yeah, without further ado, I'm going to seamlessly transition into a different save file, and I'll see you there. Okay, so welcome into a time in the past when things were a little bit different. It sort of started with me researching kind of covers. I knew that I wanted it to have this kind of grand pavilion or gazebo style sort of dome structure because I thought that would be really cool, but I wasn't exactly sure how I was going to build this. I knew that we had these kind of curved wooden beams in the sorcery pack and that they would make quite a good sort of template frame structure really for this whole thing. So it started off with me just building this kind of framework here, and I am achieving this using the classic method of having a gridded pillar in the center. You can see that this pillar here is centered on the grid. This is a resort balcony pillar 1, and if I just get rid of all these other bits here, you know, the way you would create that is you would, first of all, I'd place this down with one of these pillars, and then, you know, you can grab both of them and duplicate it, rotate it around, and then every time you select them all with the pillar, duplicate it, and it's always going to rotate around where the pillar is because it's tied to the grid. And then because these are now all equally distant from each other, if I select them without selecting the pillar and do a Control X to advance move, when I rotate these now, the axis will be directly centered here, and it will allow me to rotate it like this. And this is like, you know, oh, I was going to say it's basic stuff. Obviously, it's like to somebody who's brand new to the game, this won't seem basic, but this is a technique that's been around for years at this point. So to a lot of people, this won't be new information. But yeah, so that's how we get this kind of structure going in the first place. If we undo that and go back to what it looked like before, we can obviously then add in this element here. I just like manually lined this up so that I felt like it was kind of pointing towards the center like that. And then if we do the same thing again, this time with those extra pieces selected again, we can we can do that, and then we've got this sort of basic structure here. So that's how the frame is built using the kind of pillar rotation method. Okay, so the next challenge obviously is then how do we fill these segments with roof tiles, because the idea generally is that I want to have this whole structure kind of filled with these kind of domed or arching roof tiles. Now my first idea was just to use the same roof tile piece that I've used everywhere else in the park, which is this resort wall decoration wooden trim 2 corner is what it's called, and it's just this tiny little kind of wooden block. That's the piece that I used on this roof here, and all of these like custom roofs in the main street use that same piece as well. So that was my first idea, and in Planet Coaster 2 we've got these awesome moving platform pieces which have this great feature where while you're adding scenery to them, you can select to have the scenery added using mirroring basically across the sort of axis. If we attach this to here, we can come into this little cog under the move thing, and we can select a symmetry type, and we can have this mirrored mode where it will, every time we place a piece here, it will mirror that piece on the other side. So my thinking was that I was going to attach these to the thing, and then on either side I would mirror them, and then I would just have to fill in one half, right? But the problem here is that this particular piece, I think it's because the origin for this piece is along one of the edges and not in the center of the object. And as a result, when you mirror this piece, you get this weird thing where it's not, you can see it really if I rotate it this way. Look, it's like oppositely mirrored for some reason. I don't know why this is, but basically it makes using it for this particular task like completely impossible, because as you can see, if I try to sort of create an interesting archway shape like this, you just end up with an absolute mess basically. You know, it's a nightmare basically. So I thought maybe I could sort of turn these roof tiles into little like blocks of multiple roof tiles that are kind of attached to an arch shape like this. I can do them like 4 tiles at a time, and that'll be much quicker and easier. But even just doing this row here was kind of slow and painful, to the point that I was thinking I'm gonna have to do this on both sides all the way up. This is going to take absolutely ages, and I'm not even sure that it looks that good. So at this point I'm thinking I really need to find a different tile piece that I can use, where I can attach it to the mirroring tool and we can get some symmetry going, and this will just be much easier. So this is where we land on the ideal tile piece for this particular job, I think, which is the submarine ballast panel. It's a piece that looks like this, and I think it actually works really well for this particular situation because it's got this kind of like nice rounded form. It almost looks a little bit kind of cartoony. I think it fits really well into the style of the park. And it's also like quite a bit larger than the original tile size, as you can see here, which I think works really well for a structure of this size. As I was saying, the way that I'm doing this basically is I've still got this kind of like central line here that I'm following. As I go up each row, I'm just making sure that I'm rotated according to this sort of center line here, and then I'm going from the middle out to the edge, following this kind of, I did the bottom one first to get that kind of curve started, and then as I go up I rotate the first ones to kind of be aligned to this, and then I rotate them out towards the edge. And because it's all being mirrored around this platform here, when I start each one, you can see I just have to select one and it gets mirrored with the second one. And the other important thing here, I should say, is that I'm making sure I've got the world axis selected for when I rotate the piece. When I rotate it around the red axis here, it's automatically doing like 2 angles of rotation for me, so I don't have to kind of continuously tweak each piece to get it perfect. And we're only able to do that because when I first placed these pillars down, I didn't rotate the pillar at all. I just placed it down in its default mode, and in fact all pieces in the game really, when you first select them and go to place them down, as long as you're not using a line to surface or anything like that, their default orientation will be to the world axis. So this grid pillar is just on the world axis. This whole side here that I'm building on is on the world axis. You can see from the gizmo here, which is pointing directly at the flat side of the pillar here. So as a result, we can freely sort of use the world axis to our advantage here to make sure these are being rotated properly. And yeah, then it's just kind of a simple case of going along like this. This isn't exactly quick, but it comes together a lot quicker than it did trying to kind of one at a time place these little wooden pillars. As you can see, it's doing both sides at once. As I do this side, it does the other side automatically. So we only really have to build one half of this, manually placing each tile, and then eventually we'll have the whole thing covered. Just like that. So now that we're at this point, what you could do quite easily, honestly, just select it all, rotate it around the pillar like before, then you've got 4 sides covered, then you just duplicate that entire building with angle snake turned on to 15 degrees for this particular case because it's 8 sides. And there we have it. We've filled in the whole roof. Obviously, you could just do that. That works perfectly fine. What I actually did, because I wanted to, first of all, I wanted to add some color variation to these tiles so that they're not all identical colors, right? That's kind of a really important thing when you're doing a roof like this. You know, it's not the end of the world if you leave it all one color, but a big part of it is color variation. You want some tiles to be slightly lighter, some to be slightly darker, some to be like a slightly different hue, and then that's going to really start to make this sing. So we do run into a little bit of trouble here though, because obviously we've created this using the moving platform. Only one half of this is technically selectable at once, right? You can see it's made quite an odd selection there because of the way I've selected it. But yeah, as you can see, this half is selectable, and then it won't let me select any of these other pieces because they don't they sort of, I don't know how this works. They don't exist to the game, really. They are there visually, but they are not entities that I can click on and recolor. So, you know, I can start recoloring stuff, but the problem is that we're going to end up with a sort of mirrored pattern. It's not going to look random, which is what we want. And the other issue with using these rotational platforms, I don't know, I'm not an expert on this, so don't quote me 100%, but I believe that there's some performance impact to be had from the way that the game is kind of calculating the existence of the half of these that are mirrored. I don't really know if there's more of a performance impact on using the mirror tool versus actually having all these extra pieces in your park. Like, it could be identical as far as, you know, as far as I'm aware, I don't know. But really, because we want to recolor this whole segment randomly, like, it would benefit me to split these off from the rotational platform and have them all as individual tiles. So, as you may know, it is currently very annoying to remove things from a rotational platform. The way that I do it, and this is something that SP worked out back when he was building his kind of T-posing characters, which he also did using mirroring. And I'm just going to delete the teacups because I keep accidentally selecting it. What we can do, select just the left half, then we are going to press Ctrl D to duplicate that selection, and then we are going to add it to a different scenery group. Now, I've not made this particularly easy for myself on the demonstration here, but I don't know, you may be able to see this is now part of this pillar here, and then we can move it back in line there. Maybe for now we'll just leave it a bit lower like this. Then we're going to do the same thing with the right half. Just select the right half like this, Control D, add it to this other building. And, you know, I'm doing this very sloppily because this is just a quick demonstration. But yeah, now basically we've got the tiles. Then we can just get rid of this. We don't need these anymore. We can grab these tiles. Let's just deselect everything that we don't want here. You know, when I was doing this properly, I did not add this to the same building as the beams. I think I had another pillar with a name that was easy to spot. You know, you can make that a lot easier for yourself than I just demonstrated. But for the sake of demonstration, it's fine. So then we're going to split that off into its own building. And now, you know, we've got these as their own separate building. We can go around and randomly select a bunch of these, give it a bit of this treatment. Obviously, this is quick and dirty just to get the pointer across. I would do more than that as I did in the final product, but you can see the point here. And then what we might do is take one of these pillars, split it off, join it together with these tiles here, and then we can just literally do the pillar rotation method again like we did before. For some reason, when you rotate the whole thing, it's a bit weird, so we're going to do it 4 times, and then we're going to rotate this whole building, including the pillar. And obviously ignore those little gaps there. I would fix that up if I was doing this properly, but for the purposes of demonstration, that is how I built this structure. It's just that simple. But seriously, I think it is much easier than, you know, when you see I mean, I'm like this anyway. When I see a structure like this in the game and it looks like really complicated, the truth behind it is that it's sort of fiddly to achieve, but not actually that complicated, right? Like, once you've got a kind of a basic understanding of the kind of geometry of what's happening here, you can use the tools in the game to achieve relatively complex stuff like this fairly easily with a bit of patience. Obviously, this still took quite a long time to individually place even just like half of one of these segments. It took a couple of hours, I'm not gonna lie. But yeah, so that's how this was made, and you can do it too. And that brings us right back to the start of the video with the finished product. Obviously, I added many more details to the entire structure, including this kind of cap on the top of it, which again, I just did the exact same thing. It was kind of all just, you know, I built one little segment here and then just rotated it around using a pillar. But yeah, this is the finished Teacups ride. If I bring you around to the entrance here, the ride is called Fête de Jacques, and the idea is that it's kind of a sort of festival hall on the inside here. We've got these kind of bunting and lights, and there's sort of flowers and supplies in the middle, and then Jacques with his little lute. I guess this is a lute he's playing. There will be a soundtrack eventually, and maybe we'll get his hand kind of animated to strum while the ride's kind of cycling. But yeah, that's the kind of inside of the ride. It's fairly simple. I haven't themed the cups yet. I may come back in here and re-theme the cups to be slightly more kind of rustic looking somehow. Not exactly sure what that would look like. Maybe they're just little like barrels or something. But yeah, the outside of the ride. Got to give a huge shout out to Richie for suggesting these kind of dock piles to cover up the lights that were left over from the ride pad here. I think they make good thematic sense for the area, and they look nice, and yeah, very pleased with how that came out. And then as for the queue itself, I made these fun little kind of thematic bins for this area, the kind of dock area. And then yeah, the queue, you kind of come in here as the kind of main path area kind of is going slightly uphill from this point. You've got this nice kind of sort of step on your right here as it's stepping up to the kind of main path level. I don't know, that's just a nice little bit of kind of dynamic pathery, if you want to call it that. It just adds this sort of fun little kind of element to it. There are still some floating lights here, which is slightly annoying, but what are you going to do? And then at the end of the switchback here, you've got this kind of cool moment where you're up close to the ship, and it kind of the theming of the queue sort of slightly transitions into being a little bit more kind of dock themed here at the edge while you're by the water. And then yeah, it just doubles back on itself. It's kind of semi-covered. So if it was raining, you know, you could huddle up towards the centre here underneath the cover, but it's not kind of completely covered all the way across. And then yeah, you come around. I built some custom entry and exit gates. That's basically it. Job's a good one. And then yeah, for the rest of this area, obviously on the right side, we've got the beginnings of the rapids. I'm not going to talk much about this in detail. You can see progress has been made, but it's still very much work in progress, so we'll talk more about this in a future episode. On the other side of the path here, we've got this mini little kind of like dock port area, Le Port de Jardin, which is just kind of a little fun sort of chill out zone slash, you know, it's not interactive theming because you can't interact with it, but it's just a sort of little, you know, you can come and have a nice look at the boats. I know that at like Disneyland you would be able to just walk onto this boat, but that ain't happening here. And then on the end here we've got this fun little kind of building. It's kind of like a little, maybe a hideout for some pirates or something. Just a little kind of like thematic building here to tie the area together. But yeah, I thought it kind of filled in this sightline kind of nicely. It also helps to solve a little bit of a thing that happened. The very first iteration of this that I kind of quote unquote finished was really, really large. Shout outs to Blue Spirit on Bro Nation for kind of, I mean, I'd been aware of it as I was building, but I was thinking like, oh, I don't think I'm going to bother doing anything about this. It's not bothering me that much. And then Blue Spirit kind of gently pointed out that it was looking very large, and as a result it was kind of dwarfing the fortress a little bit. So what I ended up with doing was shrinking the size of the dome a little bit. Originally it kind of came out past this kind of stone outline on the teacup pad here, so I shrank the overall size of the whole ride structure, and then creating a little bit more distance between the teacups and the fortress here. And then I also raised the fortress up a tiny little bit out of the water. It was originally sitting lower in the water, so I raised the whole thing up a tiny little bit more, and I made this main tower structure a little bit larger. And from the other side of the lake here, you know, I just get a much nicer kind of silhouette that kind of like cascades generally down towards this. And then just having this little building here next to the castle kind of helps set the scale a little bit. So then the other thing is that as a result of kind of raising the fortress up a little bit, it's created this kind of gentle grade in the path here where it's kind of gently, slowly bringing you up towards the fortress, towards the coaster, towards the entrance to the rapids right here. It looks very epic from down at this point on the path here. You've got the big coaster looming off in the distance, and this kind of gradual incline leading up towards it. It's kind of this nice moment of anticipation, I think. As I said, next time we'll talk more about the rapids. Hopefully I'll have some more of that done to show you, and if not, then we'll talk about something else. I'll have something else. I'll have something done in the next episode. Anyway, thanks for sticking with me. Hopefully this was an interesting episode looking at the making of the teacups. I thought it might be interesting to show that off, and I've been really enjoying, I and many other people have been enjoying John T's kind of slow build challenge mode series where he's building his park in real time basically. Yeah, I don't know, I thought it might be nice to kind of like slow down and talk you through how I made something rather than doing a speed build or pulling it apart after the fact. I thought that would be more fun, so let me know how you found that. And my voice is starting to go now. This is what happens when you've had COVID for a week. So on that note, I will love you and leave you. Thanks so much, and I'll catch you next time. Bye!